financials and you think, I got to change things up. I'm Barbara Menino.
And I'm Christine Rothdeutsch.
And on today's episode of Soapbox Wisdom, we're talking about what you do when you realize that what you've been doing isn't working. And before we get into our discussion, we want to remind you to like, comment, share. So, Christine, this is a topic that you brought up in one of our discussions, prompted by some words to yourself about, I got to do some things different. Why don't you give us some context?
Well, yeah, as I was thinking back, this topic came to me when I think about times over the years in my own business that I would take the time, and I'm taking the time to look at where I am. Maybe it's not at the end of the year. Maybe it's just a certain month, and start adding up the numbers, or what have I done this past month? Have I gone to all the networking events that I wanted to get to? Did I speak at them? And it would hit me. It's the times where it would hit me like, oh, I didn't do what I wanted to do. Oh my God, something's got to give. And, this part of it comes out of, I think, well, what I have learned from past coaches is, keeping track of numbers of activities, but it's so easy to get away from that. And I just realize more and more that it's so vital that we stay aware of where we're at instead of those moments of like, oh no, now what am I going to do? Yeah, so that's where this topic it came up as like I say, taking the time to think back, and it still comes up for me occasionally, but then deciding what's going to change. That's the big thing. You have to decide, what you're going to do differently. And like I say, you had started this episode with talking about your yearly financials. This is still a fairly new in a new year and everything. But again, these things come up for you at various times of the year, and yeah, it's just being aware of where you're at all the time, and it's not easy. But if you want things to change, yeah, you need to do that. So, yeah.
When you talk about being aware, what comes to mind is working smart, not just, or maybe instead of working hard. And when you talk about taking the time, you give an intention to time so that you manage it, you take charge of it, it doesn't run you. And I think a lot of that starts with asking yourself questions, the right questions. To your point, did I go to enough networking events? Did I spend too much money on the wrong services that are not really aligned with my goals and moving me forward? Have I really positioned and built my brand properly? And do I show up consistently with the right voice and the right personality and the right message that is aligned with my brand? And one last thing, when you come to these epiphanies, and you're absolutely right, you could look at something mid-year, 1 month, whatever, and find a piece of something that's wrong. I've decided that you should allow yourself to grieve on about it a bit, but grieve on strategically. So while you're grieving, you're beginning to assess and think about new ways of thinking about things, new ways of doing things, so that you can be more productive and effective.
Ooh, see, ooh, that doesn't sit well with me of grieving on. Oh gosh, no,
I
Barbara.
knew
Yeah,
that would push a button with you. Now it's a
as you're saying that, I'm like, no, no, no.
But it's
Um,
a short grieve on. I want to be clear. I don't mean that you wallow for weeks and days, but you allow yourself, you give yourself the permission to say, "Ooh, I messed up. I feel a little sad." But you embedded in that is, now what am I going to do about it to turn around? So it's not a wallow. It's just a little bit of gentle permission.
well, but if you find yourself doing that too often, ooh, that's not a good place to be. The last time this hit me, I, gosh, no, I didn't go down any rabbit holes at all. I knew I had to change what I was doing. There were things. Okay, so there were things that I know I should do. There are things that I write on my calendar, and then I come up with a reason not to do it. And I put my foot down to myself and I said, knock it off. I said, this is silly. It's like, what are you doing to yourself here? You know, these are events you should be at, showing up. This is what you should be taking your time to figuring out. And some of the things that you mentioned, Barbara, come under admin stuff. And I think people are afraid to take that time to do those admin things that they say, well, that doesn't make me money. But when you're looking at what you've done, looking at your results, making decisions to change something, if you don't do that, nothing's going to change. So that time is vital to your business. But I'm thinking a lot of people don't take the time to do that. I mean, well, here we are again at the beginning of a year. We're coming, oh, a tax year. Oh, all the accountants and bookkeepers are really busy and everything.
Full
And
swing.
people are still waiting until now to gather all their information from the last 12 months and pull it together so they can get their taxes on. Well, how silly is that?
The box is full of receipts that
Yeah,
you're now going to organize and
yeah.
fix. You're so right about taking the time. you know, we spin our wheels. Well, we say we don't have enough time. And so we spin our wheels to get everything in. But your point about some of those small, detail oriented administrative tasks, in many respects, they become the building blocks. If we don't have those we don't understand those building blocks. How in the world can we move forward? How can we say, I want to increase my business by 20 or 30% next year and be specific, and then go from that number to the action steps that you have to take to do that? So instead of running, spinning your wheels, moving from one task to the next, taking time to do some of that stuff is time well spent. It's like the story of the tortoise and the hare. Do you burst ahead and then lose momentum or lose focus? Or do you go slow and steady, wins the race, because you're earmarking all the essential steps and creating and laying the foundation that's important to your ultimate goal?
Yeah, and it's, you're thinking ahead instead of being reactive in your business. This is helping you to be proactive, to think ahead. And there to witness too many people over the years who operate on a, well, I need to get an email out today. Okay, here, I'm going to write the email today. Oh my goodness. How, and then it gets sent out and you're wondering, oh, geez, did that say exactly what I wanted it to do? Is that going to have the response that I wanted to have? When you do these things ahead of time, again, so taking the time to think and plan and everything, but also creating ahead of time so that the actions you are taking are going to be valuable. It's looking at things all along the way instead of waiting till they smack you in the face.
Preparation, not procrastination, right?
And that, when I think about that, that brings up a little story, Barbara. I do have a story today that I wanted to share. This awareness, personally, here at my home, I have a nice large yard with some trees, and some trees have put them in the place that they're at that we didn't want them. How they got there, thanks to the birds, I don't
Mother
know.
Nature.
And there's this one particular area in my backyard that wasn't paying much attention to because it's a lot of yard, right? And I knew this tree was there, okay? In fact, oh gosh, how many years ago, I actually put a hook on it that I could put a bird feeder on it. It's like, oh, this is really neat. I got this little tree. It was just a little thing. It wasn't a big one. Um, but then we wound up cutting a little bit down, but then kind of stopped paying attention to it. And last year, I looked and I'm like, oh my God, it's really close to those. It's getting close to electrical lines. It's in a place we don't want it. It's just a pain. I took my saw out and I sawed part of it down. I was like, I mean, now granted, it was, and you say, well, why didn't you get somebody to do that? Oh, Barbara, it was so rewarding for me to cut this tree down. It really was. It felt so good. But I looked at this and I'm like, if I had been paying attention to the last few years, it, I wouldn't have had to put as much work into it as I had to that day that I took it down. Now, granted, we're talking something, maybe a 4-inch diameter tree. So it wasn't,
It's
huge.
very impressive that you did that. My Ross would be unduly impressed with you that you took out the saw, you took down the tree.
But it's the same thing in our businesses of if you don't pay attention to things, they get out of hand and you're like, oh my God, now what do I do? Well, you know, take a look on a regular basis, evaluate, make decisions instead of waking up one day and like, oh my God, how did I get here? You know.
You said something before that I found very interesting and related to something I heard someone else say this week. The person was talking about emotional business management, and she gave an example of, just as you did, putting something on your calendar and then looking at it and saying, oh, I don't feel like attacking that today. So you shelve it. I'll do it another day. And the next day or the another day never comes. And so perhaps a very vital action never takes place. And that is not only procrastination, but it is a place where emotion doesn't work well in business, that, oh, I don't feel like it. Or conversely, sending out the email at the last minute and it turns out to be spaghetti on the wall rather than a strategic, well thought out, good piece of content that aligns with what you're trying to accomplish and your larger goals. So, while emotion is important when you're with the concept of your brand and trying to attract new customers, it doesn't work for the process and operations and the financial piece.
Well, and I want to add into that thought also, Barbara, that if you find yourself, say, bring up email again, sending an email out and saying, "Oh, it's okay," or maybe it didn't get out on the day that you wanted it to, or at the time you want, and you're like, "Oh, it's okay, it can go out whenever." That's a signal that you're in trouble, I think,
Yeah.
because everything matters.
Yep.
And I think when you have that attitude, you're kind of sending the universe a message, a negative message. So why are you doing it then? Like why send an email out? Why do social media posts if it doesn't really matter what time it gets out, or if it's exactly what you wanted it to be? Ooh, that's a negative message to the universe.
It is indeed. I also wanted to mention something else, which I do somehow think factors into this conversation. Um, while one is dedicated to their work, there is always room, I feel, in business for humor. When you can step back from something and grow from it, maybe when you laugh a little bit at it, it clears your head. It
Mhm.
gives you the right energy to move forward. Taking time to relax, we've talked about communing with nature, going on walks, cutting down a tree. Little tiny mini luxuries that again clear your head, give you the energy to move forward productively. So there are many elements that come in, and definitely there are challenges, definitely there are daunting tasks, but there's a way also to make even the hardest things pleasurable too. And I think that's important for mindset.
Well, yes, and um, I think too, instead of, I'm going to add to that, instead of like taking a mini time out, it's no, you need to take more time out. Because, you know, our listeners might be thinking, no, wait a minute, I have to do this in my business, I have to do this. And now you're saying, oh, got to take time out. Here's the thing, and I've been seeing it more for myself this past year of taking more time away from business just to one, sit in silence, take a walk in silence, one, to clear your head, two, to get fresh ideas. When you take that time away, your mind can deliver so much more than staying in all that noise out there. Because all that the noise coming at us is just adding to more troubles in our business. We can't deal with it. It's just not physically possible. Our brains can't do it. Our conscious and unconscious mind can't handle it. So you need to take more downtime. And that was something that also came out of when I read the book, The 5 a.m. Club. They're into it was all about what you do from 5 to 6 a.m., but also there was a good lesson in there about taking time away from your business and getting out in nature. That was a big
Nature's a
one. Get
great.
out in nature because nature can bring such rewards in so many ways. Um, I knew I was onto something all these years when I said I love to be out in nature. I love to walk and everything. I was onto something, I guess.
I read something about the 3/8 rule, 8 + 8 + 8, and 8 hours of work, 8 hours of leisure activity or time with family, and 8 hours of sleep. And to your point, when you do that, that's a good. I know it's a lesson I have to learn. When you do that, and it's just what you said, you're able to have these fresh ideas. You you are rested, therefore energized, and you open yourself up to a world of possibility. And by the way, when you do that, when you take that extra time, you cultivate and embrace gratitude because you start being able to take a deep breath and appreciate even the smallest things. I read a wonderful essay just recently about a woman who got up very early one morning and the light of day was starting, but she saw the moon in the sky. And she said, it's daytime. I'm not supposed to see the moon. That's at night. I'm supposed to see the sun. And then she sat back and she thought what a wondrous gift it was to still see that moon in that early morning sky. And she had gratitude for the beauty and just the experience of that. So, all these things, whether it's the moon, cutting down a tree. All these things factor into good business along with good business best practice.
Yes. So I hope our listeners have enjoyed this episode of Soapbox Wisdom. We've taken some twists and turns here, Barbara, that even I didn't think would come up. But that's what's so interesting about our conversations.
Yep.
We don't know where it's going to take us. So I hope our listeners will take everything we said with a grain of salt, but be conscious of where you're at in your business. Don't wait till the end of the year at tax time to say, oh my goodness, that was a bad year, or you need to be taking that downtime, the admin time. It's critical. But then make adjustments that are going to be valuable and not just, I'm just going to add another activity. No, it's got to be a valuable, inspired action. Any last words, Barbara?
I think that actually sums it up, except to say that when we do start talking, our minds start going. And that's what makes this so enjoyable for us. Certainly hope it's enjoyable for our viewers too.
Yeah. So tune in to the next episode of Soapbox Wisdom.
Soapbox Wisdom is hosted by brand messaging and storytelling consultant Barbara Menino and business and mindset coach Christine Rothdeutsch. You can find them online at barbaramenino.com and